A major signing and major moves are coming to the New York Rangers, as it seems like the Rangers and GM Chris Drury are not done with this offseason just yet. There's multiple players who are eligible for PTOs, and the Rangers may be looking into that as the season approaches quickly. We're going to break all of that down, but before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 70% of you watching our videos are not actually subscribed to the channel, so if you want to do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers. Training camp and the season are quickly approaching, and with that, the Rangers can add a few more players through PTOs, and we're going to have a couple players today that may shock you, right? Maybe you think they're good fits. We're going to break what those players bring to the team down and see who our favorite is at the end of the video. I already have one in mind that I think is already my favorite, but we'll break it down. We'll get into it. Now, this was the article posted by Lucas just yesterday, and 3 players the New York Rangers need to sign to PTOs. And there's a couple other players, and some players are quickly going off the board. There's a player like Nick Cousins that I thought was going to get a PTO, but he ended up signing with Ottawa. I thought that was pretty interesting. But nonetheless, we'll get into 3 players today that I think that the Rangers could absolutely target. And we'll start with the first one, who is James Van Riemsdyk. I think JVR would be very, very interesting for the New York Rangers. I think, first of all, he's a great player still at his age, in a depth role, that is. Obviously, his best playing days are gone behind him in Toronto and, of course, Philadelphia, his early Philadelphia run, I should say. But last year, he signed a 1-year deal with the Boston Bruins, and it wasn't bad. He didn't have a terrible season, and he had a good he was very useful in the playoffs, I thought, especially against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then in the second round, obviously, the Bruins just couldn't match up to the Florida Panthers. But I thought JVR was okay. During the regular season, he scored 11 goals and had 38 points in 71 games played, which is more than most people thought he was going to play. So in that case as well, if they do sign him to a PTO and they like him enough, the Rangers this is, to keep him full-time, I think he's a guy who can come in and play a handful of games for you with that experience. And maybe he doesn't beat out guys like maybe Cooley, because he's going to play on the left wing somewhere in the bottom 6, I would imagine. Like, the top 6 is pretty much cemented at this point. I think at this point, at least heading into training camp, we'll see how Riley Smith does on the top line. But not saying that he would be replaced for JVR or anything, but I think JVR would be in the bottom 6. So maybe not, battling out Cooley for that spot. We'll get into the lineup in a bit, but I think this is a very, very good depth option. He's really good. He can help the power play as well. He's really good in front. That's where he's made, that's his bread and butter. That's where he's made his money in the NHL. So very interesting option here for the Rangers. We'll take a deeper dive into his stats. Of course, he's going to be 36 this coming year in 2025. But again, big presence, in front of the net. He's 6'3", right? He loves to play in front of the net. He has great hands in front of the net, so that could help on the power play in the playoffs. But again, he would be a depth player. He's scoring at not even half a point a game at this point in his career. So a nice little depth option, I think, for the New York Rangers. And, the next person I thought was pretty interesting too, and this might be my favorite, I think, is Kevin Labanc from the San Jose Sharks. And I know a lot of people are probably saying, Darius, what are you talking about? How is this your favorite out of all of them? I think this is a player who was a victim of being on a bad team the last couple of years. And he signed his last contract extension, which was pretty rich. It was a pretty rich contract extension for what he's done the last couple of years with the San Jose Sharks. But he had a really good year in 2019, was probably his last really good year. But the Sharks haven't done much since 2019 either. So, he was playing on the worst team in the league, as Lucas says here. And obviously, his offensive numbers took a big dive. He hasn't had a really good season in a couple years now. But again, I think he's a victim of being on a bad team. And we can deep dive into his stats, which we will in a second. And I think there's something to like about this player. Again, we're talking about he's a right shot. So when you look at this lineup, maybe you like a right shot better than Capo Caco there. We don't know what's going to happen with Caco Caco. We don't even know if he's going to finish the year with the Rangers, right? Like, he's been given a shot here by Chris Drury to kind of show us what you got, right, this season. Obviously, I think he has to play in the top 6 to kind of get an opportunity, but he's got to earn it as well. It goes both ways. We've talked about it at length this offseason. It does absolutely go both ways. So we'll see what happens with that, but I would like a right shot on that side. I think that would be a better fit for the Rangers on that third line. And then Lafreniere is a special case. He can play right wing as a as a left shot. But anyway, I think Labanc was a victim of playing on a bad team. We can get into his stats. Like I said, last year, I mean, he played half a season, or roughly half a season, only had 9 points, right? But again, on a really bad team, plus minus, I don't put too much stock into that anyway, really. Even if you play on a good team, I really just don't. I don't think it dictates. I think it's more of a team stat at times. I honestly do. But again, relatively young. He's going to be 29. Great depth option, right? And he could play in some different situations. Maybe you look at putting him on the penalty kill. But again, I think he's a good energy guy. You put him on the bottom six and he'll go hit guys, maybe chip in for a goal here and there. Could help the Rangers in the playoffs. So I think this is a guy that they definitely look at. And again, he's younger than JVR, right? And I don't think he's going to get a long-term contract or anything after the PTO. But, he at the end of the day, he's younger than JVR. What if JVR gets hurt, right? We don't know with that. But the last option I thought was pretty interesting because it has to do with the defense core, right? Which I thought was pretty set in stone. But again, having depth on defense is not a bad thing because we saw it last year. Obviously, Jacob Trouba got injured. You have Zach Jones coming in, right? So if you have another situation like that, maybe you want some more NHL experience at that position. So we'll get into that as well. And that is Kevin Shattenkirk. I thought this was interesting. Another right shot defenseman on the right side there. Could be probably a seventh defenseman, right? And bringing Kevin Shattenkirk back on a PTO would be a nice gesture by the Rangers, even though I'm not a fan of the Rangers doing nice things for players. Although, if they're a part of the team, that's great, but don't go out of your way to do nice things for players who aren't on your team if it's going to make you worse. That's what I'm saying. But, they need to be a little bit more cutthroat, I think, in certain ways like they were this summer. But, maybe more of that so you can try and win a championship. But anyway, obviously, it would be very cost effective. I think he is getting a little bit older. We'll get into his stats in a second. But, he had some injury trouble. He was a little bit mismanaged. I totally agree with that, right? I think that, if he were to come back now with the Stanley Cup pedigree, it could help the New York Rangers. And again, I don't think this is an everyday defenseman for the Rangers at this point. He would be probably a seventh, maybe even eighth defenseman at this point, but just some backup in case there's an injury and somebody with NHL experience can come in. And of course, he has that Stanley Cup pedigree. He knows what it takes to win at this point in his career. He can tell the younger guys what it takes to win, right? It's good to have a guy like this around the locker room. So, again, older. Don't know if this is the best option. There might be some other decent options on defense for the Rangers to look at this point in time, or even just, Hartford has some great options as well, right? We just went over a what's in the pipeline video just the other day, and it looks pretty promising. So maybe you look at that too, because, Shattenkirk can play in some different situations as well, but, I wouldn't have this guy on the power play or anything with the Rangers. Personally, he just wouldn't fit in, I think, in that way. And again, getting a little bit older, didn't have the greatest season last year in terms of points, but it's an interesting option for the Rangers to look at. So let me know in the comments what you think. Who's your favorite out of the bunch? I think it might be Kevin Labanc for me. I feel like this is a player just waiting to be able to play with better players on a better team in a good system, right? Him being younger, I'm probably leaning more towards Kevin Labanc. But let me know what you think if you like JVR too, or Shattenkirk as a depth option. Thought these were pretty interesting. Again, these would be PTOs, so not like a one-year deal yet. They would come to camp, show the team what they have, and then maybe they would earn a contract out of that. So let me know in the comments what you think. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.